A suburban superhero family springs into action against a villain, discovering that embracing their true selves and working together is the most incredible superpower of all. Today, we're going to tell you the story of Pixar's The Incredibles. In an old interview, Mr. Incredible, Elastigirl, and Frozone admit that every superhero has a secret identity, as it's necessary for them to keep a life outside of fighting bad guys and saving people. While Mr. Incredible dreams of settling down and having a family, Elastigirl vows to never stop being a superhero. In the present, Mr. Incredible, dressed in a tux, is driving to an event when he stops to assist civilians and police. Upon returning to his car, he finds a boy in costume who's eager to tag along. The child introduces himself as Incrediboy, but Mr. Incredible recognizes him as Buddy from the fan club and throws him out. His next stop is catching a thief on a rooftop where he encounters Elastigirl. The two flirt, but she turns down his offer to meet up due to prior plans. Later, Frozone skates by, reminding him not to be late. Just as a man jumps from a skyscraper, Mr. Incredible quickly catches him, and they both crash into a bank's office where a wall explodes, revealing the thief Bon Voyage. As they square off, Buddy shows up in self-made rocket boots that he proudly shows his hero, but Mr. Incredible rejects him again.
Fly home, buddy. I work alone.
To prove his usefulness, Buddy leaves to get the police just as Bon Voyage sticks a bomb to his cape. Mr. Incredible immediately holds onto the boy to save him as they fly off wildly. The bomb falls onto a railway bridge where it explodes, forcing Mr. Incredible to stop the oncoming train. After the chaos, Mr. Incredible has the police send Buddy home, blaming him for the mess, and Bon Voyage escaping. He finally shows up in the tux to a church where Frozone tells him he's very late. It's a wedding, and his wife-to-be Elastigirl is at the altar. She's not pleased with his tardiness and strongly suggests he put more effort into their relationship, to which he wholeheartedly agrees. They get married. Soon after, the news reports that Mr. Incredible is being sued by the people he saved, and consequently, this opens the floodgates for dozens of superhero lawsuits around the world. Responding to public outcry, the government initiates the Superhero Relocation Program to grant amnesty to superheroes, banning them from using their powers in public and forcing them into hiding. 15 years later, Mr. Incredible, now Robert or Bob Parr, works an unrewarding job at an insurance company while his wife Elastigirl, now Helen Parr, takes care of the kids. He secretly helps his clients game the system, which upsets his supervisor. One day, Helen is called to the principal's office because their son Dash kept pranking his teacher using his super speed. The camera doesn't catch him, but Helen reminds the boy that they can't reveal their powers. Meanwhile, Dash's shy older sister Violet is crushing on a guy named Tony, but when he notices her, she quickly turns invisible. At dinner, a distracted Bob leaves the table right before the kids start fighting. He reads a newspaper article about a missing person he knew as the superhero Gazer Beam. Helen calls for help as the fight turns into a brawl until the doorbell rings. Lucius Best, formerly Frozone, and Bob's best friend, shows up for bowling night, leaving Helen with frustrated kids. Without telling their wives, bowling night is when Bob and Lucius save people, reliving their superhero days. Lucius wants to stop, but Bob finds it invigorating. Tonight, they accidentally crash into a jewelry store when escaping from a burning building with the unconscious people they rescued. This alerts the police, who think they're criminals. Lucius uses his powers, allowing them to get away. Both don't notice the women spying on them. She calls somebody, recommending a switch from Lucius to Bob, confidently stating he's the one their boss is looking for. When Bob gets home, he finds a worried Helen waiting. When she recognizes he's been out superheroing, she's furious at him, risking their family's cover. They argue, but immediately stop when they find the children listening and reassuring their kids that everything's all right. The next day, Bob is called to the office of his supervisor, Gilbert Humph, whose callousness infuriates the former superhero so much that he throws the awful man through several walls. Bob's fired, and he's reprimanded by Rick from the Superhero Relocation Program. He returns home depressed, but finds an unfamiliar tablet in his briefcase. It confirms his identity, and a message plays from a woman named Mirage, who claims to represent a top-secret division of the government. She offers him a secret mission to stop a robot that's gone berserk, along with a very generous salary. Bob lies to his wife, telling her his company is sending him to a conference, and excitedly accepts Mirage's offer. He's briefed about the machine he's neutralizing, called the Omnidroid, and then sent to the island base where it's at. Though out of shape, Bob finds the robot and disables it after some initial difficulty. Behind the scenes, Mirage and her boss evaluate his performance. When he returns home, a rejuvenated Bob is affectionate with his wife and happily spends time with his children. He buys new cars and gets back into shape. When his superhero costume needs fixing after the Omnidroid battle, Bob visits renowned fashion designer and superhero costumer Edna Mode, who insists on making him a new suit.
What do you mean? You designed it.
I never look back, darling. It distracts from the now. You need a new suit. That much is certain.
You want to make me a suit?
You push too hard, darling. But I accept. It will be bold, dramatic, heroic.
At home, Helen finds a long strand of silver blonde hair on one of her husband's suits. When the phone rings, Bob rushes to take it, which makes her suspicious. She listens in and overhears a secretive conversation between her husband and a woman we know is Mirage. She tries asking him who the caller was, but Bob quickly leaves, saying he's going to another conference. A fancy jet brings Bob back to the island base where Mirage compliments his new suit. Meanwhile at home, Helen notices patching on Bob's old supersuit sleeve and calls Edna about it. The designer sounds thrilled to receive her call and insists that she come over immediately. While waiting in a conference room, Bob is attacked by an improved Omnidroid. It immediately grabs him, never letting him recover and trapping him. A supersuited man flies in, declaring the droid finally is ready. This is Mirage's employer, who is also controlling the robot. He monologues, revealing himself as ex-superfan Buddy, who now calls himself Syndrome.
Who's super now? I'm Syndrome, your nemesis.
Mr. Incredible's rejection tore him apart and taught him not to count on anyone. Bob apologizes, but a bitter Syndrome doesn't care. He's now rich from inventing weapons and intends to unleash the Omnidroid. Bob tries to take him out with a log, but Syndrome uses 0-point energy to throw him around, accidentally tossing him too far, which gives Bob the chance to run. Diving into the water, he escapes being blasted by entering an underwater cave where he finds the remains of the missing superhero Gazer Beam. He discovers that Gazer Beam etched the words Kronos onto the wall. When Syndrome's droid comes by, Bob avoids detection by hiding behind the skeleton. The drone reports that Mr. Incredible is terminated.
Light reading negative. Mr. Incredible terminated.
Meanwhile, an inspired Edna shows a stunned Helen the suit she designed for the whole family. She assumed Helen knew. Realizing that Helen has no idea what her husband is up to, Edna hints at Elastigirl probably needs to find Bob wherever he is, offering Helen the remote for the tracker embedded in each supersuit. On the island, Bob infiltrates Syndrome's base, bypassing heavy security to enter the control room and accessing the system using Kronos as the password. While Helen finds out that Bob was fired months ago, her husband discovers that numerous heroes have died battling the Omnidroid and that Syndrome plans to use it to wreak havoc on Metroville. As he's leaving, Helen activates his suit's tracker, which beeps and triggers the room's security, leading to his capture. Helen is devastated after discovering Bob's lies, but Edna firmly reminds her that she's Elastigirl, urging her to confront the problem and win.
What are you talking about? You are Elastigirl! You know where he is? Go, confront the problem, fight, win!
Later at home, Helen packs and tells the children she's going on a trip that concerns Bob. While she's deciding what to do with the new suit from Edna, Dash sees them and excitedly puts his on and grabs Violet's for her. Helen borrows a jet from an old friend from her superhero days to find Bob. As she approaches the island, she radios for permission to land, only to hear static and no response. On the island, Syndrome interrogates a captive Mr. Incredible, truly impressed with how he tricked the drone. He taunts Bob, saying he's disappointed that the superhero called for help since they received a request to land from a government plane. When Bob denies it, Syndrome plays Helen's radio message, which Bob instantly recognizes. Seeing that Bob knows the people on the plane, Syndrome launches missiles at it. On the plane, Helen changes into her supersuit and discovers her 2 older children are on board. They're worried about her and stowed away, leaving Jack with a babysitter. While on the phone with the sitter, Helen spots the missiles headed towards them. She tries to evasive maneuvers and radioing to call them off, revealing children are on board, which Bob hears in the room with Syndrome. Desperate, she tells Violet to put a force field around the plane, but the kid is too panicked. The missiles hit the plane as Elastigirl uses her powers to protect the kids from the explosion, and they safely land in the ocean. Believing his family died, Bob is heartbroken. With a surge of strength, he takes Mirage hostage, demanding Syndrome to let him go. Syndrome calls his bluff, and a defeated Bob releases her. Syndrome calls him weak, while Mirage starts feeling sorry for him. Using their powers, Elastigirl and the children head toward the island, and they reach the shore after dark. Hiding in a cave, Helen tells the kids that their father is in trouble. As she leaves to find him, she instructs them to stay hidden, but to use their abilities to protect each other. Elastigirl sneaks into Syndrome's base and sees a rocket preparing to launch. Aboard, Dash decides to explore the cave despite his sister's protests. Just as he finds a tunnel, Syndrome launches the rocket, causing a fireball to fill the cave. Dash and Violet quickly escape in time to witness the rocket shoot up from the volcano. The rocket travels through the atmosphere and falls back to Earth, with pieces falling off until a sleek plane carrying a sphere is revealed, heading straight for Metroville. The next morning, Dash and Violet encounter a robot bird that issues an alarm, alerting the guards up to their presence. At the cell block, Mirage releases Mr. Incredible, but an angry and bitter Bob grabs her. Mirage tells him his family survived, and Bob hugs her out of sheer relief, just as Helen arrives and sees them together. She punches Mirage and accuses Bob of being unfaithful right before Mr. Incredible pulls her in for a kiss. Though Elastigirl is mad, they waste no time when Mirage tells them their kids are in danger. In the jungle, the guards catch up to Violet and Dash. Violet tells her brother to run before turning herself invisible. Dash outruns the guards in every turn, discovering that he can also run on water. Bob and Helen make their way up to save their children. Dash keeps his sister from being shot, and Violet protects him with her force field. Pushing her force field down like a hamster ball, Dash propels them forward with his speed, and the siblings escape, downing guards in the process. Eventually, they run into their parents, and the Parr family is reunited. When the guards show up, the parents easily defeat them, impressing their kids. The family displays wonderful teaming in fending off more guards, but Syndrome appears and uses 0-point gravity to capture them. In front of a restrained Parr family, Syndrome monologues his master plan. The sleek plane from the rocket has arrived at the city. The sphere is disguised Omnidroid that will cause enough chaos for Syndrome to show up and play the hero, proudly saying he'll be a bigger hero than Mr. Incredible and will have achieved it all without being gifted with powers. It's clear he resents supers for their natural abilities, revealing that he intends to sell his invention so everyone can be superheroes, which will make real supers ordinary.
Everyone can be super. And when everyone's super, no one will be.
He leaves the Parrs with live footage of the Omnidroid. Bob apologizes to his family for being a lousy father. While he's promising to do better, Violet uses her force field to escape the binds and releases everyone. The family heads to the hangar, where they find another rocket. With Mirage's help, they use it to get to Metroville. In Metroville, Lucius sees the commotion outside his house and rushes to find his missing supersuit to go help.
Honey!
What?
Where's my supersuit?
What?
Where is my supersuit?
As the Omnidroid continues its rampage, Syndrome appears rescuing citizens and announcing he's a new superhero. He pretends to fight the Omnidroid while secretly controlling it, but since it's a learning robot, it zaps the remote off Syndrome's wrist, knocking him out. The Parr family arrives, and they race to the Omnidroid's location. Mr. Incredible intends to fight it alone, but Elastigirl disagrees. They argue until Bob admits that he's not strong enough to lose them again. They share a passionate kiss as Helen tells him he doesn't have to do it alone. Just then, the Omnidroid attacks the kids, stomping through Violet's force field. Bob intervenes while Helen brings them to safety. Frozone shows up and the three supers work together to fight the droid, but are unable to defeat it. Bob finds Syndrome's remote and remembers that it controls the robot. As the droid goes for Mr. Incredible, Dash yells for his dad to throw him the remote. He catches it with the Omnidroid hot on his heels and Frozone helping him out. When he drops it, an invisible Violet picks it up, pushing some buttons that crashes the bot into a building. When the robot recovers, Bob realizes the only thing strong enough to defeat it itself, so he takes one of its detached claws and tells Helen to press the button that turns on the claw's boosters. They use the claw as a missile, taking out the Omnidroid's core, and the robot collapses and blows up. The civilians cheer for the superheroes just as Syndrome wakes up to see it and becomes enraged. On the way home, Agent Rick commends the Pars for stopping Syndrome, and though they've frozen Syndrome's assets, he's yet to be found. Meanwhile, Helen becomes increasingly worried after listening to message from Jack's babysitter, Carrie, which ranged from several panic calls for help, a full freakout, and the last one thanking Helen for sending a replacement, which she didn't do. They race into the house where they're zapped by Syndrome's zero-point gravity. He's holding Jack and intends to kidnap him and raise him as his own. He flies away with the baby, heading towards this plane parked above the house. But a frightened Jack starts manifesting his shape-shifting abilities, attacking Syndrome, who drops the baby. Mr. Incredible throws Elastigirl to catch Jack, and he also chucks his car at the plane to keep Syndrome from escaping. The villain's cape gets pulled into the plane's turbines, and it explodes, falling onto the Pars' home. While Violet manages to protect everyone in time, their house is destroyed, but the family is content to be alive together. 3 months later, Dash is at the stadium running his first track race, with his family cheering him on to happily win second place just to hide his powers. A confident Violet arranges to go on a date with her crush Tony. As they're leaving, a villain called the Underminer shows up, threatening the city's peace and happiness. The Par family, now known as the Incredibles, don their masks and suits, ready for action. So what do you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments, and if you enjoyed this recap, please like and subscribe for more. See you next time.